The war had burned across the stars for so long that Varencourt could no longer remember the first battle he had seen. He had fought on cold moons where the ground cracked beneath his boots, in burning cities where the air turned black with ash, and in the silent void between worlds where ships died without sound. He was a commander of the Drelvan Guard, a soldier of a race that had fought for centuries. He thought he knew what war was. He thought he understood it completely. To him, war was a matter of discipline, of calculation, of perfect control. His people fought with the elegance of a blade master, every move planned, every loss measured, every victory precise. There was no chaos, no emotion, no waste. And because of that, Varen believed his people were the best warriors in the galaxy. Then came the day he was sent to a small blue planet called Earth. The Coalition claimed it was just another defense mission. A primitive world was under attack by the Crack's dominion, a brutal and relentless species known for their cruelty. The Drelvans would fight alongside the planet's native species, humans, to help them survive. To Varen, the humans were nothing. More than fragile creatures with short lives and outdated weapons. Their bodies were weak, their armor thin, their ships slow. He had read the reports, studied their military tactics, and come to one conclusion. These humans would not last a single cycle against the Cracks. This mission would be nothing more than a mercy effort before the inevitable defeat. He stood aboard his command ship as the fleet entered Earth's orbit. Through the viewport, the planet looked almost peaceful, vast oceans reflecting the sun. Green continents stretching beneath white clouds. Brune wondered if the humans knew that their world was already marked for death. The Cracks never attacked. For conquest alone, they attacked to erase. 100 worlds had fallen before, their people wiped from history. Varen had no reason to think this one would be any different. The first battle began 2 days later. Small human outposts came under heavy attack from Crack's ground forces. Varen's orders were simple: observe, gather data, and provide support. If the humans requested it, he doubted they would last long enough to ask. From the control room, he watched the drone feeds as Crack's warriors advanced through the ruins of the outpost. Towering, armored, and armed with plasma rifles, they moved like an unstoppable tide. Varen waited for the humans to break formation, to flee, to surrender. That was what logic dictated. That was what any lesser species would do when faced with certain death, but the humans did not run. The first thing Varen noticed was the shouting, not in fear, but in defiance. Human soldiers yelled to each other, their voices raw and loud even over the gunfire. Some were laughing, as if the chaos of battle only fueled them. They moved fast, darting between cover, firing in short, vicious bursts. A soldier took a hit to the shoulder, dropped to one knee, and still kept firing with his other arm. Another soldier, bleeding heavily, charged forward with a combat knife, leaping onto a Crack's warrior 3 times his size. They went down in a blur of steel and claws, and when the fight ended, neither rose again. Varen's cold, Drelvan mind tried to make sense of it. This was not strategy. This was not the disciplined, ordered warfare he understood. The humans fought like predators, fast, brutal, and unafraid to die if it meant taking the enemy with them. He saw a squad pinned down by Crack's fire. Instead of retreating, one of the humans stood, pulled the pin from a grenade, and ran straight into the enemy position. The explosion shook the drone's camera. When the smoke cleared, the humans advanced through the gap he had created, their faces grim but determined. More strange than their tactics was the look in their eyes. Varen had seen many soldiers before, but never eyes like these. There was no calm, no detachment, no resignation. There was something fierce, something that burned hotter than reason. It was as if they were fighting not just to win but to make the enemy suffer for every step they took. As the battle raged on, Varen felt an unfamiliar sensation in his chest. It was not pity, it was not respect, it was something colder, something sharper. It was fear. Not fear of the Cracks, they were predictable, dangerous but known. No, this fear was for the humans, or rather of them. If this was how they fought, against an enemy they barely understood, what would happen if they ever turned that fury on someone like the Drelvans? The Cracks' attack eventually broke, not because the humans had more weapons, not because they had more soldiers, but because they simply would not stop. Every time the Cracks gained ground, the humans took it back, inch by bloody inch. They fought, until their ammunition ran dry, and then they fought with knives, with shovels, with their bare hands. When the last Crack soldier fell, the humans did not cheer. They simply reloaded, tended to their wounded, and prepared for the next wave. Varen watched in silence as the drone feeds went dark. In all his years, he had never seen anything like it. The Drelvan way of war was precise, efficient, logical. The human way of war was something else entirely, something primal, dangerous, and impossible to predict. In the quiet that followed, Varen found himself whispering into the empty command deck. This is not strategy. This is not logic. This is something far more dangerous. Far below, on the surface of Earth, the next battle was already beginning. And for the first time in his long life, Varen wondered if even victory would be enough to survive what he had just witnessed. The morning after the battle was heavy with silence. The ruins of the human outposts still smoked, the air carrying the sharp smell of burned metal and blood. Varen stood on the edge of the landing zone, his eyes tracing the jagged shapes of collapsed buildings. Human medics moved through the rubble with quick, desperate hands, pulling the wounded from the wreckage. Some of those they found still clutched their rifles, even unconscious. Varen had seen soldiers fight bravely before, but never soldiers who seemed to keep fighting even after their bodies had given up. He had been ordered to meet with the human ground commanders that day. The coalition wanted better coordination between their forces and the human military. Varen expected the meeting to be slow and clumsy, two very different species struggling to understand each other. Instead, he found himself stepping into a storm. The human command tent was alive with movement. Maps covered the walls, marked with red and blue lines that shifted as new reports came in. Officers shouted across the room, issuing orders with a speed that left even the Drelvan Comes officers scrambling to keep up. What shocked Varen most was how quickly they adapted. Only hours ago, their defenses had nearly collapsed. Now they had already rebuilt their positions, reinforced weak points, and even set up new ambush zones. General Morgan, the human in charge, didn't look like the leaders Varen was used to. His uniform was worn and stained. His eyes were sharp, but his voice was calm in a way that carried weight. He studied the maps like a man reading a familiar story, nodding slowly as updates came in. When Varen was introduced, Morgan only gave him a short glance before turning back to the table. "You Drelvans fight with precision," Morgan said without looking up. "That's good for open fields and fleet engagements. The Cracks aren't giving us open fields. They're coming for our cities. They're coming for our homes. And here, precision isn't enough. Here you need teeth." The word stayed in Varen's mind longer than he cared to admit. Teeth. It was not the way his people thought about war. Yet as he listened to the humans discuss their plans, he began to understand. They were preparing to fight in streets so narrow that vehicles could not pass. They planned to use the ruins themselves as weapons, collapsing walls, setting traps, forcing the Cracks into killing zones. It was messy, it was chaotic, but it was clever. That afternoon, Varen accompanied a human strike team on a counteroffensive into Cracks-held territory. His Drelvan instincts screamed against their methods. They moved too close to enemy lines, split their forces without warning, and seemed to improvise constantly. Yet somehow it worked when a Cracks patrol ambushed them. The humans didn't retreat to regroup. They scattered into alleys, disappearing like smoke, only to reappear behind the enemy moments later. One soldier, a young woman with a scar across her jaw, noticed Varen's hesitation. "You're thinking we're reckless," she said as they crouched behind a wall. Her voice was steady despite the gunfire around them. "We are. But reckless keeps them guessing. Guessing keeps them slow. And slow gets them killed." They moved again, clearing building after building. Varen found himself relying on their instincts. They didn't follow orders the way did, but they read the battle in a way that made orders almost unnecessary. When one soldier advanced, the others shifted without being told. When someone ran low on ammunition, another passed them a fresh magazine without looking. It was as if they were connected by something invisible, something stronger than discipline. Hours later, they returned to the outpost with captured cracks, supplies, and to rescued civilians. The humans were tired, bloodied, and bruised, yet their spirits burned as bright as they had in the morning. They laughed as they cleaned their weapons, told stories of the day's fight, shared food with each other as if they had not just walked through death. Varen stood apart, watching them. Among the Drelvins, victory was quiet and solemn, a moment to record and analyze. Among the humans, victory was alive. It was a thing to hold on to before the next storm arrived. You realized something unsettling: then humans didn't just fight. To win battles, they fought to keep each other alive, even when the odds were impossible. And that meant they were willing to do anything, use anything, sacrifice anything to achieve that night. Varen sat alone in the Drelvin command room, replaying the day's footage. He paused on a frame showing a human soldier diving in front of a Krax plasma bolt to protect another. The energy blast burned through his armor, yet the soldier still managed to pull the pin on a grenade and throw it before collapsing. Varen stared at the frozen image for a long time. The Drelvin way of war had always been about survival, minimizing losses, preserving the strength of the army. But the human way of war seemed to turn that rule upside down. To them, the survival of the individual was secondary. The survival of the group was everything. That was why they could take risks no sane Drelvin commander would approve. That was why they could win battles they had no right to win. When the report was due, Varone sent only one short message back to the Drelvin High Command. The humans are not what we believed. They are dangerous not because of their weapons or their technology, but because of what they are willing to do when the enemy is at their door. The message was flagged for review, but by then, Varen knew it didn't matter. The Krax would learn soon enough. The sky above the city burned a deep, angry red. Columns of smoke twisted upward like black spears, and the air was filled with the low hum of incoming Krax dropships. Varencourt stood on the roof of a shattered building, his eyes scanning the horizon. This city, once a place of glass towers and bright lights, was now a fortress built from rubble. Every street was blocked with overturned vehicles, every building wired with explosives. The humans had turned their home into a trap. They were ready to spring it. The Coalition fleet had taken heavy losses in orbit the night before. Several Drelvin cruisers were gone, burned out in the silence of space. The Krax had driven them back, and now the city was cut off from most support. Varen's orders were clear: fall back, regroup, and prepare for a counterattack elsewhere. The human forces had been given the same directive, but the humans didn't move. General Morgan's voice came over the comms, calm but unshakable. We hold this city until every civilian is out. No exceptions. Varan tried to argue. Can't hold against a full Krax assault. If you stay, you will be overrun. Morgan's answer was a slow, heavy breath. Then we'll be overrun on our feet, not running away. And that was the breaking point, the moment Varen understood that the humans were about to do something no Drelvin commander would ever attempt. They weren't planning to survive this. They were planning to make the enemy pay for every step they took. The assault began before dawn. Krax infantry poured into the outer districts, their massive frames moving with a mechanical precision that mirrored the Drelvin's own style of warfare. Plasma bolts lit up the streets. Buildings crumbled under heavy fire, and yet the humans did not retreat. They fought from windows, from rooftops, from behind walls so thin they barely offered cover. Varen moved with a Drelvin squad to cover the southern approach. But it was the humans who led the charge. He saw a squad of them pinned down by Krax. Gunners. Instead of waiting for reinforcements, they climbed the side of a half-collapsed building, leapt onto the enemy's flank, and destroyed the gun nest with grenades. The explosion sent debris raining down, and the humans were already moving to the next fight before the dust cleared. Hours passed. The city shook under the weight of the battle. Streets ran red in the glow of the fires. Still the humans fought. They seemed to grow more dangerous the closer the Krax pushed to the heart of the city. Varone noticed something terrifying they were learning. Every failed attack became a lesson. Every fallen comrade sparked a new tactic, where Drelvins would retreat to preserve their strength. Humans adapted on the spot, using whatever they had left to turn the tide. Then came the worst moment. The cracks brought in heavy armor-towering war machines bristling with weapons. Varen ordered his troops to fall back to the next defensive line. But the humans stayed. A team of 4 soldiers rushed toward one of the machines, dodging streams of plasma fire. 2 went down instantly, but the other 2 kept going. One climbed the leg of the massive machine, while the other drew its fire. Varen watched, stunned, as the soldier planted explosives along the machine's armor plates, dropped to the ground and detonated them. The blast tore the Cracks war machine apart, throwing both humans clear. One didn't move. The other crawled to their fallen comrade, dragging them into cover before collapsing. Varen realized his Drelvan forces were already halfway to the next line. The humans were now fighting almost entirely alone. Against every instinct, he gave the order to turn back. The fighting dragged into the night. The city's power grid failed, plunging the streets into darkness lit only by fire and gunfire. The Cracks kept coming, but the humans kept answering. Varen found himself shoulder to shoulder with them, firing until his rifle overheated. He saw soldiers with broken limbs still holding their positions, their teeth bared in something that was neither smile nor snarl, just the raw face of refusal. By the time the last civilians were evacuated, the city was barely standing. Whole districts had been reduced to smoking craters. Cracks had taken massive losses, but the humans had paid dearly for every inch of ground. Varen walked through the ruins, stepping over shell casings in the fallen, human and Cracks alike. General Morgan met him at the extraction point, his uniform scorched, his face streaked with blood. "City's yours if you want it," he said hoarsely. "We're done here." Varen stared at him. "You lost almost everything." Morgan gave a tired shrug. "We saved more than we lost. That's the job." Varen looked around at the soldiers, gathering for evacuation. Their faces were hollow with exhaustion, their bodies battered, but their eyes still burned. He knew then that if the Drelvans had been in the humans' place, they would have withdrawn long ago. They would have lived to fight another day, but the civilians in this city would be dead. As the transport lifted off, Varen felt the weight of the day settle in his mind. The humans had crossed a line in his understanding of war. This was not about survival, it was about refusal. Refusal to surrender, refusal to let the enemy take what mattered, even if it meant dying for it. In the quiet hum of the ship, he finally admitted the truth to himself. The Drelvans were warriors. The humans were something else, something far more dangerous. The rain came in sheets that night, falling hard enough to turn the streets into shallow rivers. Thunder rolled over the ruined city like the growl of some great beast. Lightning flashed against the jagged shapes of broken towers. Varen Kor stood in the center of the forward operations post, watching the humans prepare for the next assault. This time, the Drelvans would be fighting beside them, not behind. Not as distant observers, but in the same streets, against the same, an enemy, under the same fire. It was a strange feeling. His people were disciplined to the core, every movement precise, every formation drilled into perfection. The humans, on the other hand, seemed to thrive in chaos. Yet here they were, working together, mixing squads, swapping weapons and supplies. Without hesitation, the air was heavy with the smell of wet concrete, oil, and the electric temps of charged weapons. Somewhere out in the dark, the Cracks were massing for their push. General Morgan had insisted on a unified defense. "You want to win?" he'd said earlier, leaning over the map. "Then we fight as one. No Drelvan lines, no human lines. Just one wall they can't break." Varen had agreed, though quietly he doubted it could work. His people relied on order, and the humans relied on instinct. Those two things didn't mix. But when the first wave of Cracks warriors hit, Varen saw something that made him rethink everything. The humans moved first, quick and aggressive, darting into position before The cracks could fully deploy. The Drelvins followed, their precise fire cutting down the enemy's front line. In the middle of the chaos, the two forces began to blend. A human soldier shouted a warning, and a Drelvin pivoted just in time to take down an advancing cracks. A Drelvin sniper picked off an enemy heavy gunner that had a human squad pinned. It wasn't the clean, orderly dance of Drelvin battle formations, but it was something faster, sharper, more alive. And then the rain stopped. Not because the storm had ended, but because the firestorm had begun. Plasma bolts and tracer rounds lit up the streets, and the air filled with the roar of engines and the screams of the wounded. Varen found himself moving with a mixed squad 3, Drelvins and 4 humans through a narrow alley that smelled of gunpowder and wet brick. They cleared each corner with ruthless efficiency, each fighter knowing exactly where the others would be without needing to speak. At one point, they burst into an open square, and the cracks were waiting. Heavy fire came down like a wall. Drelvins automatically started to pull back, but the humans surged forward instead. For a moment, Varen hesitated, then he followed them. Together they pushed into the storm of fire, dropping smoke grenades, flanking, moving like parts of the same machine. By the time the smoke cleared, the cracks' position was gone. Their dead scattered across the wet pavement. Varen couldn't explain it. But fighting alongside the humans felt different than fighting with his own kind. With Drelvins, everything was predictable. With humans, every moment was a gamble, but one that somehow kept paying off. They didn't just follow the plan. They bent it, twisted it, broke it when they had to, and then stitched it back together in ways that turned impossible situations into victories. The battle raged on into the early hours. At one point, Varen's squad was cut off from the main force. They had cracks on both sides, and the rain had turned the ground to slick mud. Ammunition was running low. In the Drelvin way of war, this was the moment to retreat to preserve strength. But the humans didn't retreat. One of them, a broad-shouldered man named Harris, grabbed a fallen cracks weapon and grinned. If they want us, they're gonna have to bleed for it. He charged into the nearest group, firing wildly, drawing their attention while the rest of the squad repositioned. The tactic was reckless, dangerous, and exactly what was needed. The cracks fell, and Harris came back soaked in mud and blood, laughing like the fight had given him life instead of trying to take it away. By dawn, the cracks' attack had collapsed. The combined human-Drelvin defense had held. The streets were littered with debris and bodies, but the line had not broken. Soldiers on both sides were too tired to cheer. They simply leaned against walls, breathing hard, cleaning their weapons in silence. Varen looked around at the faces. Drelvin and human alike, Cand realized he could no longer tell the difference. In their expressions, exhaustion, pain, determination, and something else. A shared bond born from standing in the same fire together. It was not the Drelvin way. It was something new. Later, as the rain began again, Vron found General Morgan standing in the ruins of what had been a cafe, drinking from a dented metal cup. The general offered him a nod. "Not bad for our first dance," Morgan said. Varen didn't answer right away. He was still thinking about the way their forces had moved together. The way instinct and precision had merged into something that even the cracks hadn't been able to stop. Finally, he spoke. "It worked," he said. Simply, Morgan gave a faint smile. "Told you. One wall they can't break." Varen turned to look out at the battered streets. For the first time, he wondered if maybe this war wasn't just about survival. Maybe it was about learning. And if the humans could teach the Drelvins to fight like that, then perhaps there really would be a wall no enemy could breach. But deep inside, another thought lingered, a quiet, unsettling whisper. If humans could fight with this unity alongside allies, what would happen if they ever turned that unity against someone? The answer was one Varen wasn't sure he wanted to learn. The message came in the dead of night. It arrived as a series of urgent pulses through the Coalition Comms network, marked with the highest priority code. Broncore read it once, then read it again, hoping he had misunderstood. He hadn't. Cracks had deployed a planet killer, massive orbital cannon hidden on a captured moon, capable of burning Earth's surface clean in a single strike. It was already charging. In less than 12 hours, the planet would be nothing but ash, and Silence Coalition Command began drafting evacuation orders immediately. Ships were being readied to flee the system. To Varen, it was the logical choice: preserve as many lives as possible, regroup elsewhere, and plan a long-term counterattack. But the humans didn't even discuss evacuation. General Morgan's voice cut through the chaos like steel. "We don't run. We hit it before it fires." It wasn't a suggestion. It was a verdict. Varen stared at him across the table in the war room. "That's a suicide mission. Can't even get close to that weapon without being torn apart." By Crack's defenses, Morgan leaned forward, his eyes cold. "Then we get close, before they know we're there. And if we can't get out again, we make sure they don't either." In the hours that followed, the plan took shape. It was madness. From the start slip, a small strike team passed the Crack's fleet, land on the moon's surface, and destroy the weapons core from inside. The odds of survival were so low, they were almost non-existent. Still, the volunteers came faster than the slots could be filled. Some soldiers even argued for the chance to go, shouting over each other until Morgan finally slammed a hand on the table and made his choice. When the final team stood assembled on the flight deck, Varen realized most of them were the same faces he had fought beside in the streets. Harris was there, still grinning despite the heavy packs on his shoulders. The scarred woman from the earlier missions tightened her rifle strap without a word. None of them looked afraid, not because they didn't understand what was coming, but because they had already accepted it. Varen wasn't meant to be part of the mission. His orders were to coordinate the larger diversionary assault in orbit. But something in him rebelled at the thought of letting these humans walk into certain death without him. Against protocol, he requested to join them. Against his own expectations, Morgan agreed. The infiltration ship was silent as they approached. The moon, every soldier sat in the dim red light, checking weapons, adjusting gear, saying nothing. The silence wasn't fear, it was focus. When the first Crack's patrol ships appeared on sensors, the pilot wove through asteroid debris with inhuman precision, using the rocks as cover until the moon's gray surface filled the viewport. They landed. Hard, the hull shaking under the impact. The moment the ramp dropped, the air was filled with the snap and hiss of weapons fire. The Cracks had seen them. The team moved fast, sprinting across the jagged terrain toward the black bulk of the planet killer's outer structure. Varen stayed close to Harris, firing in short bursts to cover their advance. Plasma bolts scorched the rocks around them, sending shards flying. When they reached the outer wall, the humans didn't stop. Charges were set, detonated, and the squad poured through the breach before the smoke had even cleared. Inside was a maze of metal corridors and glowing conduits. The sound of the weapons core building power was like a deep, constant heartbeat, growing louder as they moved deeper. Crack's soldiers swarmed to intercept them. The fighting turned brutal close quarters, no room for retreat. Harris went down, under a blast of plasma fire, but even as he fell, he dragged a Crack's warrior with him, stabbing until his blade snapped. The scarred woman took a hit to the leg, limped forward, and kept firing without pause. By the time they reached the core chamber, half the squad was gone. The weapon's heart was a massive column of energy, pulsing brighter with every second. There was no time left. Morgan's voice crackled over, "Comes from the orbital battle above. Do it now." The explosives were placed in silence. Each soldier knew there wouldn't be time to escape. Varen worked beside the last of the humans, his hands steady even as something heavy settled in his chest. When the final charge was armed, they stepped back, their faces lit by the blinding blue glow of the core. No one spoke of goodbyes. There was only a shared nod and understanding that needed no words. The scarred woman smiled faintly, then pressed. The detonator, the world became white light and thunder from orbit.
Ah!
Varen's people watched the moon split open, the planet killer tearing itself apart in a storm of fire. The Crack's fleet scattered in disarray. Earth was safe, at least for now. But the strike team was gone. Back on the surface, civilians cheered when the news arrived. But Varen did not cheer. He stood alone in the rain, remembering the faces of those who had gone into the dark with him. They had known what was waiting. And they had gone anyway, not for glory, not for orders, but because someone had to. And that was the unthinkable truth Varen carried with him. Humans would walk willingly into the fire if it meant protecting others. No logic could explain it. No strategy could plan for it. It was not the Drelvan way, but it was the human way. And it was why the cracks had lost. The war ended not with a roar, but with silence. The cracks' dominion, broken and scattered, had withdrawn from Earth's skies. Their fleet limped away into the void, leaving behind wreckage and the bodies of their dead. For the first time in weeks, the sound of plasma fire no longer echoed through the streets. The smoke that had hung over the cities began to thin, revealing the battered skyline beneath. Varencourt walked alone through one of those streets. The ground was littered with the remains of barricades, shattered glass crunching under his boots. The air still smelled faintly of ash and burned metal, but there was something else now, a faint, stubborn hint of life. Somewhere far off, he could hear the sound of laughter. Earth had survived. But survival had come at a cost. The mission to destroy the planet killer had claimed nearly everyone who had gone. Harris, the scarred woman, and so many others now existed, only in memory. Their sacrifice had saved billions, yet it had also left a hollow place in the hearts of those who remained. For Varen, the absence felt sharper than any wound he had taken in battle. He found General Morgan at what had once been the city's central square. The great fountain there was shattered, its pieces lying in heaps of rubble. Children were climbing over the broken stones as if they were a playground. Morgan was watching them, a faint smile on his weathered face. "They're already rebuilding," Morgan said without turning. Varen nodded slowly. "You lost so much, yet you still move forward." Morgan glanced at him, his expression steady. "That's how we win. Not just by fighting, but by making sure there's something left worth fighting for." The words stayed with Varen as he returned to the Drelvan command ship. The war might have been over, but something inside him had shifted. He could no longer see humans the way he had before. They were not the fragile, short-lived species he had once dismissed. They were something far more dangerous and far more extraordinary in the days that followed. Varen began recording his official report to the Drelvan High Command. It was meant to be a cold, factual account of the campaign. But when he began to speak, the words that came were different from what he had planned. "We thought we understood war, believed we were masters of battle, but humans fight with something we cannot measure. They fight not only for survival, but for each other. They will walk into fire if it means pulling someone else from it. They will bleed for strangers. They will refuse to surrender, even when reason demands it. They fight with a fury that shakes the ground beneath them, and a unity that makes them stronger than any army should be." He paused, staring out the viewport at the blue planet below. The clouds drifted lazily across its surface, hiding the scars of battle beneath their soft white cover. "If they stand beside you," he continued, "they will be your shield. But if they stand against you, pray you never see that day." The message was sent. Varen knew it would be studied, debated, and perhaps even doubted by those who had never seen humans fight. But he no longer cared whether they believed him. He had been there. He had seen it. Before leaving orbit, he requested one last trip to the surface. There was no strategic reason for it. He simply felt he needed to see the people he had fought beside one more time. He found himself walking through a small neighborhood where the buildings were half collapsed and the streets were still cracked from bombardment. A group of children were playing in the dust, chasing each other between piles of rubble. One of them, a boy no older than Tensa Varen, and stopped. A moment, they simply looked at each other. Then the boy smiled and lifted a small battered flag in salute. Varen stood there longer than he meant to, unsure why the simple gesture struck him so deeply. Perhaps it was because the boy had no idea who he was, or perhaps it was because, in that smile, there was no fear. When Varen finally turned to leave, the sound of the children's laughter followed him down the street. It was light, bright, and defiant like the first warm wind after a long winter. Back aboard his ship, he gave the order to depart. The engines rumbled to life, lifting them away from Earth's surface. The planet grew smaller in the viewport, but the image of its scarred, yet unbroken, stayed in his mind. He knew the cracks would not forget their defeat. New war would come again, in some form, somewhere in the galaxy. But now, there was a thought he could not shake if the Drelvins ever faced the same kind of darkness that had come for Earth. He hoped no. He prayed that there would be humans standing beside them.